This is Renault's latest crossover. It's called the Symbioz or the Symbioz, depending on exactly how you choose to pronounce it, but it slots in above the Captur in the range and gives it a little bit more space inside, which we'll come to in a moment. The look is part of Renault's latest design language, and it's got a lot of sharp lines on the front, quite a vertical front here, and a big play on this Renault diamond, which on this sporty Esprit Alpine has a darker finish. There's also a lot of detailing here, again all angles that play on that diamond logo. You can also see it here in the daytime running lights as well, similar to what we've seen on the Captur and on the facelifted Clio, and you get these quite nice LED pure vision headlights as well. And even if you come right in close, you'll see again loads of those little diamond motifs throughout. A lot of nice detailed touches on this car. As I mentioned, this is the Esprit Alpine version, so this is the slightly sportier model, and that's reflected in the badge being a slightly darker color. You've got a slightly different front end here, and you've got some pretty stylish 19-inch alloy wheels. Along the side as well, on the front wings, you get this small Esprit Alpine badge here, and you've got things like contrasting black door mirrors. The roof we'll show you in a moment. It's a very cool bit of equipment, and you can see here when you see the car side on, just that bit of extra length that you have. You've got a much longer wheelbase here, and that gives it a lot more room for passenger space inside, but also for the amount of boot space that's on offer, and we'll show you exactly how much that is in a moment. But again, I love all this sort of angles here. There's a lot of really nice sharp lines here. Renault is churning out some very good looking cars these days, and it's also reflected in the rear of the car. At the back you can see again just how much emphasis they're putting on design with this car. You've got the Symbioz name spelled all the way across the back, but you've got some nice gloss black detailing here, and the rear lights really stand out. They've got a lot of nice intricate detail in them. Makes the car a lot more recognizable, especially at night. On the interior, it's the usual modern look we've seen from the latest Renault models. You get this portrait style touchscreen display, which is slightly angled towards the driver, and you've got a bank of physical buttons along the bottom for doing all of your climate controls and temperature settings. So that's nice and easy to do that. They've got a nice feel to them as well. There's a good quality to that, and you can always see across the bottom of the screen. What I also like is that they've got a new Google-based infotainment system, so everything is built into that. You've got all the usual Google functionality from Maps. You can also have all of your favorite apps. It's got all the Play Store there as well, and you've got the usual smartphone mirroring with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay as well. It all works very nicely. It's very quick to use. The interface works quite well, so I'm a fan of that. And it leaves a lot of space here as well, so you have this kind of floating console here, which is where your drive selector is, again angled towards the driver. You've got an open space here. You've got another section in here that you can drop your mobile phone into. You've got a 12-volt socket, 2 USB-C charge ports, and you still have this room underneath as well, so there's a good amount of space on hand here. You've got a pair of cup holders, and underneath the small armrest you have a little bit more storage. It is a little bit on the small side there, but you can put a few odds and ends in, so that's fine. The overall quality as well is actually quite nice. Where your legs are going to be brushing against here has a nice kind of slightly padded feel to it, which is good. And on this Esprit Alpine version, it does have some slightly different and bespoke interior features. So it's got this fabric panel across the dash with a bit of contrasting stitching and the colors of the French flag here, and also the seats as well. So you've got these nice kind of slightly sporty seats. They're nicely bolstered. You've got the Alpine logo, the A of the Alpine logo here on the seat backs, and another little label with the French flag there as well. So, you know, nice kind of quality in what you would expect, but this is after all the kind of range topping version. Now the steering wheel, again, nice size. It's big enough. You've got physical buttons here on it, so very easy to figure your way around, adjusting your volume, your speed limit for your cruise control, and all the usual format and layout is the same. All the switchgear is familiar to any other Renault models. You've got a fully digital instrument display as well, same as what you'd have in some of the other models such as the Renault Scenic, and the actual graphics and layout of this is actually really nice. There's a lot of animation there. You can pick different views depending on what your preference is, so there's nice to be able to do all that. And then on the far side you have a couple of buttons. You have an e-save button, and what that will do is that will maintain a certain amount of charge in the battery at all times. But perhaps more important is you have this kind of safety switch. So all of the new cars in Europe now have this kind of basically added safety systems, but what that means is they're always active as soon as you start the car. So you've got speed limit warnings, things like that. What this button does is we hit it twice, it will mute a lot of those. So you can set it up depending on how you want it, but if you don't want to have it binging and bonging at you all the time, you just press that twice every time you get in and it will mute those systems. It won't fully turn them off, it will just turn down some of the notifications that you get. Now there's one other very neat feature that you'll get in this car, which is the Solarbay roof. So this has a full panoramic glass roof, which is very nice, but rather than having a blind, you have this kind of electrochromatic effect. So as you change the length of it, depending on how you want it, it will go to a totally opaque, and it does it across a number of sections. So you can set it up exactly how you want it. And what this does is keeps out a lot of the heat, but it can also maintain a certain amount of heat in winter as well. So it's good at balancing the temperature inside the car, but it's also quite nifty in how it works, because it does away with having to have a blind that comes across, because that will often take away a couple of extra centimeters of headroom. It's a pretty cool modern feature to have in a car, and I just think it looks pretty cool. Anyway, this is what the front is like, but more importantly, this is going to be a family car for a lot of people, and what's in the back is every bit as important. So let's have a look there. In the back there is a decent amount of room back here. Now I'll start with myself. I'm sitting behind my normal driving position. I'm about 5'9", average height, and I've got a pretty good amount of knee room here, so that's pretty good. And I have enough room. The seats are high enough in front of me that I can get my feet in underneath the seat in front if I do want to stretch out a little bit more. So that's pretty good. Two adults will easily fit in the back here on the outer seats. The middle seat is a little bit less comfortable. It's slightly higher, it's a bit flatter, and the backrest is a little bit harder than what you'll get in the outer two seats. But the other thing is this center console does come back a little bit further, and you don't have a flat floor all the way across. So whoever is going to sit here will be a little bit hard done by. Also, because of this here, where your feet would normally be, it's not going to be quite as comfortable. Now, this isn't a tri-zone climate control setup, but you do get vents back here. You also get a second 12-volt power socket and two USB-C charge ports, and all the usual stuff. You've got nets on the backs of the front seats as well, so there's plenty of space for storing odds and ends. Interestingly, this doesn't have a fold-down armrest here on the center, though. This seat is fixed in place. But what the seat can do, which will be quite useful, is you can adjust exactly where this is. So you've got a bar here, and you can slide this all the way forward or all the way back over 160 millimeters. 16 centimeters is how much this will slide forward and back. And the purpose of that is it will either give you more room up here or more boot space in the back. Now, thanks to that sliding rear seat, you've got a lot of boot space available. Normally you get 492 litres, but if you slide that seat forward, it increases boot volume to 624 litres, and folding down the rear seats, which have a 60-40 split, gives you 1,582 litres. So regardless of how much stuff you have to cram in, there's a good chance it's all going to fit inside this Renault. Renault uses the same 1.6 litre hybrid engine in this as it does in its other models, such as the Clio and the Captur, which is the SUV below this, and for a good reason, because it's actually a pretty decent engine. Now, it's not the most economical hybrid on the market in our opinion, but typical everyday driving. Today we've done a whole mixture of different things, including quite a long stint on the motorway at higher speeds, and it's still returning fuel consumption figures of around 5.5 to 5.6 litres per 100 kilometres, which is fairly respectable in the real world for a car like this, of this sort of size. So overall, this is probably going to be a relatively economical car to drive. If you're doing lower speed stuff, if you're in towns, in cities, it's better again because it has more opportunity to spend time maximizing its small hybrid battery. And although it is small, it does actually make quite good use of it. It does work it quite hard. And as you're driving around, anything below 50 kilometers an hour in a town or in a city, it's spending quite a lot of time on that battery. And it shows you because it has a little green EV symbol will pop up as soon as it switches off the engine. And it does switch off that engine very, very quickly. It's very kind of quite hasty to do so. But there are also times when the engine will just randomly activate, not necessarily when your right foot is demanding it, but it just does that in order to manage and maximize how efficient it can be. And it does feel brisk enough thanks to its 145 horsepower output. And really what that just means is that it will comfortably cruise along at 120 kilometers an hour on a motorway without feeling strained. For the most part, the engine is actually quite smooth and fairly refined in how it works. It's only really when you go hunting for all of that performance does it get a little bit more vocal. But there's a lot of the time you're going to be driving along and you won't know unless you look down and see that green EV marker whether it's actually the combustion engine or the electric motor that's driving the car. The whole car feels quite nicely set up too. The steering has a decent feel to it. It's light enough to the touch. The only thing is the suspension can feel a little bit crashy at times. It is on the firm side, and that does show through when you're going over speed humps and through more kind of pop-marked roads. It does kind of reverberate through the cabin a little bit. That's the only thing. I wish it was maybe a little bit more softly sprung. But it's at slower speeds like here in towns where the Renault does its best work, and that's really where it's going to be at its most efficient. There's also an e-save button here on the dashboard, and that will ensure that it keeps 40% charge in the battery at all times. That maybe you want to use for a different part of your journey. And one of the things you will also notice about all new cars in Europe is that they have increased driver assistance systems. And that includes audible speed limit warnings. Now, Renault realizes that some people might not necessarily like these or might find them annoying. So if you give a double tap to this button on the side, it will automatically mute a lot of those warnings. And you can set that up depending on exactly how you want it. The one thing about the Symbioz is that it doesn't really feel like an SUV when you're driving it. Yes, you have a little bit of an elevated driving position, but it doesn't roll in the corners. You don't feel like you're driving a very top-heavy car, and well, that's a good thing. And I know these days a lot of people are either pro-EV or anti-EV, and hybrids maybe get a bit of a bad rep for being neither one nor the other, but as this car proves, they have a lot of merit, and hybrids still have a lot that they can contribute, especially if you can't plug your car in at home, if you've got on-street parking or anything like that. At least this car, when you're driving around in urban centres and things like that, it is going to be driving like an electric car, not as an electric car, but like an electric car. And well, that's no bad thing either. This is in a tremendously busy segment of the market. It has a whole host of competitors, not just as crossovers, but as SUVs, as hatchbacks, as estates. There's an awful lot to buy in this segment of the market, so you really have to stand out. And well, on design alone, they're making this car stand out. The name is something that's going to get a lot of people talking, depending on whether they can pronounce it Symbioz or Symbioz. But remember, we had a car once called a Qashqai that nobody knew how to spell, and well, that turned out to be pretty successful in the end. But this has a lot going for it apart from its name and its looks. Okay, it's only a hybrid, but for a lot of people, that's going to tick the right box. Not everybody is ready or willing to go electric just yet, and there will be conventional petrol engines coming further down the line at an even lower price point. It's practical inside as well, and it's got that Google-based operating system, which is great and exactly what you need in this modern day. Anyway, that's what we think about this car. Tell us what you think. Get involved in the comments. We'd love to hear what your feedback is on a car like this. Is this something that you want to consider for your next car? We'd love to hear from you either way. If you want to know more about it, head over to our website. It's CompleteCar.ie. You'll find it linked in the description below, and it's a great resource not only for researching your next new car, but for keeping up with all the latest motoring news. Thanks for watching.